I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're talking about 6 games I played so you don't have to. Some pretty big games here, and of course, this is just my opinion. If you disagree with me and think these games are fantastic, well, that's great. I'm glad you like them. And so mention it in the comments. Tell people why you like the games. And these are just my thoughts, and I want to go through each of these 6 games, so let's get started. First, we have this one here. I can't pronounce the French name of this. It's the Year of the Five Emperors. It takes place in Rome, obviously, during that turbulent time where lots of people were trying to be, the next emperor. This is a deck building game, a game where you're building cards you're building your own little deck. But this one has kind of a twist. You're building a deck normally, which means essentially you're just building a deck sort of to get points and they build cards into your deck. But at some point, you need to declare yourself emperor. And at that point, you're going to start using your deck for other means, fulfilling objectives and defeating others. And you need to fulfill 4 objectives to win the game. It's a clever theme. I think it works well. I don't dislike the artwork. I like the historical nature of it, the different emperors, most of whom, unless you're like someone who's kind of steeped in the lore of Roman history, you probably won't know most of them. And the game is fast-paced and moves fairly quickly. The problem is sort of the turn of the game. You have to pick this point in time where I'm going to become the emperor. I'm now going to start using these cards for other means and start going for these objectives. And these objectives also go back and forth. And you're not really sure when that is. If you miss the turn, in essence, you kind of lost. Every time I played this, the person who made the turn earliest won. And everyone else felt like they should have turned earlier. And again, you can play that to get to that point. The symbols also aren't super clear, and the game does come in French with the rules and everything, so that didn't help, and the whole thing feels a little clunkier than it needs to be. It feels a little bit like Seven Wonders, the deck building game. There's colors and stars, and and there's even spots to go to where where you declare yourself emperor, but it almost feels like you need to memorize all the cards and what and where and when. The thing is, this feels like a weird, interesting game. And I kind of like weird, interesting games, but this one's weird in like, wow, that was kind of cool and interesting. Not weird in the, I really want to play it again. So I didn't dislike this one per se. And I applaud the idea of this one. And it's more of an artifact of, wow, that was interesting. And I move on. So this one gets a 6 out of 10. Nestlings. This is the deluxe version of Nestlings. It's way overproduced, but it is a beautiful game. This is from Tangerine Games, designed by Brandon Omi. And like I said, it's an amazing game, Nestlings. And the art, the dice, the cards, those weird pie pieces that you're going to use to build your nest, just looks great on the table. And I like the general concept of this game. There's 4 biomes. There's dice being pulled from a bag, manipulating dice, although manipulating dice is not as easy as it sounds. And so you're rolling some dice, and then you're placing these dice out to take stuff from locations. This is the general major problem with Nestlings. You have a die that can be placed in 1, maybe a second, and if you spend 2 of them, a 3rd location. There's not a lot of choices to be made there, which really drags it down. The feeding phase, that sounds interesting. The rolling phase, and all, they all sound interesting, but actual practice, they are slow and boring. You're limited by the dice. You're not really fighting for a biome because like whoever goes there first gets to pick the things first. But if I put 2 dice, I can beat you. But I spent 2 dice, and that's a big deal in this game. And when I do that, I'm hurting myself a little bit, but really hurting you who might have gone there first. And the tiles pulled from the bag are random. You might be looking for specific foods to get. And there's no real high to this game. This game just feels like drudgery over and over again. Roll dice, place a dice, see who wins each thing in the biomes, get them, and then the feeding, which gives points. You're feeding your birds. It's not only is it boring, but it is kind of a convoluted thing to do. Okay, if you feed your bird one of your food plus other foods, and it's like, what? All these rules, but the actual game of Nestlings feels much smaller and not particularly fantastic. It's kind of confusing to teach and play. Collecting the wheel tokens is neat visually, but doesn't really do anything. Everyone has the same kind of wheels, and there's not a lot of excitement in this game. I thought the rule book was okay at best, but the biggest problem with Nestlings is simply that the game itself is boring. I wanted to like this much more. I like the idea of collecting food for animals, but on this one, I'm going to pass a 4 out of 10. Star Tycoon is a game in which you're building a galactic corporation. This is from Peter and Akira Sanderson from Good Games. And the idea is sort of interesting, but super generic. Like, hey, you're a global corporation and you're trading. Like, there's a lot of board games that do that. Why am I doing this again? I think it's an excuse to get the amazing artwork in here, and Good Games definitely makes a good game production here. But yeah, the galactic trading, huzzah! Each turn you are going to be getting, you have some stuff in front of you. You get some blue production boxes. You even have this planet called Omniforge, which you always get. You can even get it twice. And then you get these tokens, right? You have these resources to spend. And then every turn you can purchase, trade, Omniforge, reserve, smuggle, refresh, and loan. Purchasing cards. It's a neat idea, although you're kind of limited by what's out there. And you can reserve a card, keep it for later if you want. Trading action. There's a galactic market where you can trade resources for other resources. And it's neat when it works in your favor, but it feels a little chaotic, that market. Smuggling sounds cool. There's the smuggling actions, but they're not on that many cards, so you won't see it very often. Refreshing. You can refresh a row to see if there's something else there, which is great, but sometimes hurts other players. And sometimes you do it for that purpose. And then there's loans. Ugh, I don't like loans, so didn't do that much. This collecting planets, you're going to do that for points and production and trying to get everything. It sounds fun, but it's too slow and meaningless. This says 25 minutes per player. I believe that is incorrect. It is much higher than that, and it just kind of drags on. Now, again, the production, the iconography, the graphic design, I don't really have any problems with that, but it just feels long, and the analysis paralysis, if any player has a hard time picking what they're going to do, that drags the game down significantly. The randomness in the market cards is a bit much, and you're often speculating on future randomness. You know, I'm going to do this and hope I can get another red planet. Oh, one came out. Oh, one came out. John in his turn wiped the cards. So all that is tough, and I just kind of got bored by the end of the game. So looks great. I kind of like it for a little bit, but after that, I get bored. 5 out of 10. Terminus is a game from Inside Up Games, who just is fresh on the heels of Earth, super popular game. Earth is a fairly medium weight Euro game. I want to be clear, Terminus is not. You are building a subway line to shape the city's future. Now, Terminus, of all the games that I'm talking about today, is definitely one where I can say this is not a game for me. This is a game that feels like it might have been designed by Vital Lacerda, because it is a very heavy game, and a lot of it is about planning for the future. Because you're building subway lines in here. In my first game of this, the game was 1/3 over, and I still had not built one single subway line. Now, that's the point, is building the subway lines, but there's kind of a way to get to these points, and you're building neighborhoods. And by the way, I think the production of this game is fantastic, but the board is ugly and boring. And there's a rondelle on this board. You're moving around a rondelle for actions, and I felt like it was confusing sometimes on how it worked out. There's this big rondelle, there's different actions, and the game is not particularly friendly to new players, because at the beginning of the game, you're like, pick some resources. You're like, I don't know, what resources do I want? I can pick these or these or these. After you play a while, you'll go, oh, they should have just told you what resources to start with, and then said, for your future games, then you can pick. But that's the way this game is. And to build a subway, I need to get permits and road work in this. And it just feels to me like bureaucracy, the game. It's very tight. You can't waste any time. As you move along, you can move as far as you want on this rondelle to take actions, but you're skipping other actions. But it always feels like the action you need is farther up. But then you skip these actions, and then you wonder, was I efficient as I went through them? And none of it feels, at least to me, very exciting. It's hard to fulfill the private objectives that you get. There's buildings that you can build to make actions better or more interesting, but it's tough. The game is just so tight. I'm just like, let me have this one thing. Let me have this other thing. And I know for some of you that is amazing and you'll love it. But the market prices being fluctuating, I didn't find that interesting. It felt chaotic with the other players. And the game just feels like a machine. You're putting the pieces on this boring looking map, and you are the mechanisms. And it doesn't feel like there's any freedom. I don't have freedom to make any mistakes, and it's too restrictive. And so I can see, though, that some people are going to really enjoy this because a lot of people like these style of games. And you might say, Tom, you should like these style of games. Sometimes I do, but in this particular case, this one fell flat for me. This is a 5 out of 10. Like I said, there's some interesting concepts here, but this one crosses the line from becoming a game and feeling like work. That's Terminus. All right, then we're going to have a small game here called The Feds. So The Feds is from Steve Finn, who's Dr. Finn Games, and he's known for games like Biblios and Herbaceous. And in this one, you were trying to capture a bunch of criminals. And at that point, we're kind of running out of theme. In this game, you're going to pick a city to use. There's a bunch of cities that come in a box, and they all have kind of different special abilities. One comes with a die that you roll. And then there's these 4 locations, and there's going to be some random criminals based on these locations. On your player's turns, you're going to be picking agent cards to play and a location to play it. You place it at the corner of where you're going to send it, which I found a little bit clunky to do that. And then you put the agent out, and sometimes they're face down, sometimes they're face up. There's a mole that might be there, and they change things. They move criminals from one spot to another. There's going to be all this kind of loopiness of moving these criminals around, special abilities. And when there's 7 agents at a location, that location is closed. And then you'll check the strength at each location. It's kind of area control. Whoever has the most will take all the criminals of one color, and so on and so forth. Grays are wild. For me, and then there's like a whole scoring track on how much each of them are worth. For me, it is way too short and way too random. I felt like I had no control when playing this game. It's just so chaotic and wild, and it never feels like you get to the point of the game. I'm like, I'm doing this, doing this, doing this, and we did all this, and we scored, and I'm like, okay, next round, no, that was the game. Oh. The artwork's fine, but I never felt like there was any real strategy. And the moles, there's a die in the game that's used in one location. That stuff doesn't, and I just was not very impressed with the overall feel of this game. The theme, like I said, is not there. There's pink thugs, blue thugs, green thugs, gray thugs, whatever. And the special abilities, even like the mole does different things at depending on the location. New York and Detroit don't feel different than each other other than special abilities. And I left this one with a really meh feeling to me. This is a 4 out of 10. Lands of Mesozoic. This is a game about dinosaurs. Go figure. It's from Pungo Games, designed by Ander Guinea. And like I said, all about dinosaurs. When you first look at it, the game itself looks a little bit about wingspan, because in here you're also managing an ecosystem. Here you have 3 lines of cards. You have a bottom line of lands. You have 5 different lands: forest, prairie, dry land, water, and wetland, which, by the way, I always get those mixed up. You then have a second line where you can have small, medium, and large herbivores, and then you can have small and large carnivores at the top. So there's 3 periods in this game, and each period has a certain number of rounds. There's 18 rounds total, and there's events. And then on your turn, you're going to play a card, activate a card, use a special effect, action, or pass. And what you're doing is you're trying to get cards in your park. So first you're playing lands. And almost every card you play requires a discarding of other cards. And you're going to find in this game, you're going to run out of cards really fast. And that is kind of a hanging point of this game, is how slow it is. It's an engine building game to get things going. First, you got to get some lands. Then you need to have lands to get an herbivore. You need to get some herbivores out to get a carnivore. Well, that sounds basic, but it shouldn't feel like it stretches on forever. The dinosaur artwork is good, but you're kind of building these out. And then there's an overgrazing rule where if you have too many carnivores and not enough herbivores, some of the carnivores die off. If you have too many herbivores, not enough land, some of the herbivores lie off. There's also random events that are happening, usually not terribly debilitating, but it just takes a long time to get anything going. Since you always have to pay cards, I mean, you have a special action where you can discard cards to draw cards from any deck you want that you can use once per turn. But some lands are better than others. Some give you points. As the game goes by, your cards are going extinct. And extinct is not bad, because extinct means you'll still score your points at the end of the game. At the end of the game, all your stuff goes extinct. But there's just too many rules in this game for too little to do. And then there's extinction events, which you drop down cards. You get rid of cards from your hand. There's goal cards, which don't feel equal because some you might just draw into them. There's too much randomness in the cards you draw from the deck. The game is too slow. It never really gets going, and it doesn't ever seem like I'm getting to take very fun actions. It's clunky and discarding cards to play cards in this particular game isn't enjoyable. I don't mind a game that makes me make tough choices. I mind a game where I'm kind of like, I have 4 cards. I play these 2 to play this one. I have 1 left. Nothing I can do. Pass. And that's what so many turns feel like. And then you finally draw a carnivore card, and this carnivore needs to eat a large herbivore, which you don't happen to have. And that just gets frustrating after a while. I like dinosaurs. I think the whole thing looks nice, but I just didn't enjoy it at all. A 4 out of 10. And that, folks, is 6 games. Like I said, you will probably like them more than me. And if so, tell everybody why you like them and why. Not why I'm wrong necessarily, but why the game is actually fun. Or maybe you do agree with me. Who knows? Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.